3, 2, 1. YouTubers, Ivan Milat. Arguably the worst in Australian history, if not the most notorious for his horrific crimes. Backpacker murderers, killed, found guilty for 7. They think that he did many more. You know, a lot of people went missing around the same place, same time, similar circumstances, backpackers, hitchhiking, all that stuff. No, and a lot of the bodies weren't found for years. So we're assuming that he probably got better at it, at disposing of them. And Balingalai Forest is ginormous. Things could easily, people could get eaten by the wildlife, and then their bones undiscovered for a long time, go under the brush and all that shit, you know. He could have buried some at the start and then just got sick of burying them. There's a big gap between when he first got charged with grape on a backpacker, the R word, in 1971 to 1989. So in between that, what happened? Anyway, that's when his first people started going missing anyway. He didn't get caught till 1994. I have a reaction video for you from a channel called That Chapter. Really good channel. A lot of crazy stuff. In this video too, there's a few things I had no idea about when it comes to Ivan Milat. I've not watched everything on him. It's hard for me to stomach some things. But there's also his final interview. And just watching that and the way he reacts at the end of throwing his final interview or a segment of his final interview in there, and the way he looks and that, the way he went out, he had esophagus cancer, so esophageal, yeah, so that's what it is. Ivan Milat, hope you enjoy, or not enjoy, but learn something. Australia's worst animals, criminals. Some aren't animal, you know, some just did some hectic, crazy shit. But obviously we're going to start off with Australia's most well-known, Ivan Milat. This guy sometimes gets a little bit of praise in the media or notoriety for the wrong reasons. We all need to remember that he is a rapist. You know what I mean? The R word. He did do that to innocent young girls and stuff. So yeah, let's get into it. This is Ivan Milat reaction video from That Chapter. We can't skip forward. We're doing this real time, real live. So as I'm watching it, obviously it's a reaction video. LOL. Should I just say LOL? See, he's talking about Australia. He's a pretty good guy. He's pretty, you know, decent. For Hogan's leathery skin.
Crikey, and I don't use that term lightly. This ranks on the opposite. I'm going to keep my Australian accent impersonations to a minimum this time because it never goes well. It began in the early 90s, and what was presumed was that, koalas had finally developed a taste for guy. He's a fierce devil. So let's give this tale a go. In late 1989, a man traveled to Australia. He was very, very excited to visit.
I don't
he
want to
always
pause
wanted
because
to
when
go,
I overlap it, I want it to
backpacking
coincide with
his way
it.
across that great big country.
35 years ago.
At the time, he was 23 years old. His name was Paul Onions, and he was from Birmingham, England. He was just out of the Royal Navy and was looking for a fresh
photos of
start.
these.
He first stayed at a modest backpacker hostel in Sydney's King Cross area,
When you have
the
kids
heart
and you
of
start to think of other
Sydney, and
people
where
as
a lot of backpackers first go,
kids, it's
and he was
wild.
partying and living the good life.
Like
Sipping
you can imagine
Fosters,
them as your kid,
eating
you know?
Vegemite. Don't know what that is, it sounds disgusting. And just generally
Vegemite.
other Australian things. However, his time flew by, right? And he was having a grand old time. His work visa was good to go. His wallet, not so much. And so after, going around town looking for some casual work and being unable to get it, he was recommended to do what pretty much all backpackers do in Australia, do seasonal work, fruit picking.
Come on.
A few friends told him the best place for that sort of thing was in the Riverina area. Basically, a big old agricultural area southwest of Sydney.
Wagga wagga.
And so he was like, well, I've never picked fruit before.
A lot of tourists do
I'll
this.
give it the good old college try. He was going to tum it and hope for the best. Now, I know little, being honest, about Australia, but I do know it's pretty big and mostly filled with nothing. Australia is incalculably large. So it was brave of Paul, and he didn't even know what was coming. He set out on the 25th of January 1990 and ended up on the side of a highway in Liverpool, outskirts of Sydney, and stuck the thumb out. It's hot, shockingly, in Australia in January, which is like the middle of summer in the southern hemisphere.
Right now.
So I'm sure that was some crack. So he popped into a little shop, was going to get a cold drink, and then he was just like randomly approached by this lad who came up and asked him if he needed a lift, asking where he was going. South. Same direction. And so they set off. This guy said his name was Bill. Big Bill. And he was full of questions for young Paul. Where are you from? Are you alone? Who knows you're here? When you due back, mate? They were yapping away, and Bill said he was from a Croatian immigrant family, divorced, and from the local area. Their chumminess dwindled, though.
Like straight out.
An hour into the trip, Bill started to become more agitated, aggressive, bitching and moaning about everything. Racist shite, sexist shite. And then he shut up completely. They eventually pulled over on the side of the highway. Bill said he needed something from the trunk. Paul
Never let him go to the trunk.
He did not want to be there with this Bill. He also got out, at which point Bill told him to get the fuck back in the car. Bill then produced a revolver and pointed his iron at Paul. This Bill then produced a rope. And, well, you can see where this is going. Paul, he had some plums on him. He just somehow got out of the car and started racing through traffic on the highway, swerving and dodging cars.
Well
when
done,
he crossed
brother.
the road, he turned and saw Bill smiling at him. Paul eventually flagged down a passing van, at which point, while stopped, Bill sprinted at him, lunged, and grappled Paul. They fought, and Paul somehow managed to get into the van, and they drove off, leaving this Bill behind. Terrified, as you can imagine.
Fucking crazy, what the fuck, eh?
He went to the police, but nothing happened. They didn't have enough to track who this Bill was. Paul would stay in Australia for a while longer before returning home to England, still scarred by what happened and what could have. It would be years later before Paul would learn who Bill really was. And who he really was, you probably guessed. That was Ivan Milat. Ivan Milat also thought he would give something the good old college try. Killing Paul Onions was his only survivor.
Crazy, eh? First one, got it wrong. 2.5 years later. Let's go. Fuck, man, you just want to like... And his nephew too? Like, I'll tell you about his nephew after this. Yeah.
On Saturday, the 19th of September, 1992, some folk on an orienteering course were out training in the beautiful Belangolo State Forest. Let me tell you about Belangolo, baby. It's big. Lots of pine trees, and it's about an hour and a half south of Sydney. It's good for camping, maybe biking the trails, and other things too, as Ivan found out. The rest of the population started learning that Saturday, 1992. It was a lovely day, and the orienteers were deep in the woods when they began to smell something foul. Rotting meat. Maybe a kangaroo. Maybe even a wacky wallaby. Maybe a dingo. It wasn't. After they reported what they found, the police and detectives arrived that night, and the case of the backpacker murders began.
Wow.
The very next morning, a second body was found just 100 feet from the first. The two bodies would later be identified as those of British backpackers, 21-year-old Caroline Clark and 22-year-old Joanne Walters.
How do I find this spot?
Last seen, like where Paul had stayed in King's Cross on the 18th of April, 1992.
Together.
5 months before they were found. They, like Paul, had been travelling looking for work. They had been reported missing in the British media, but they completely disappeared. Until now.
Shit.
It was very gruesome how they died. Joanne, she had been gagged and stabbed 14 times. Her spine had been severed, so she was paralyzed. She had no defensive wounds on her, and so it seemed like she might have been paralyzed before she was stabbed to death. Caroline had been shot. She had been shot 10 times in the head. She was also paralyzed.
10 times in the
way
head?
She was laid out, it seemed like she had been used as target practice. How they died would lead the police to believe that the killer had taken his time. Due to the isolated area, the police thought whoever did this was likely a local. No out of Forester probably would have gotten in this far. Jewellery remained. No real robbery. Bullet casings were found too. Cigarette butts also. The killer took his time. Though the decomposition was intense, there was no sign of a sexual motivation to the murders, though one of the victims' underwear was missing. They were just killed for the heck of it. Over the next week, multiple searches would be done in the forest, searching for clues, maybe more bodies. None were found, nor really anything else. Months would go by, and the idea of it being a serial killer, that would not enter anyone's head, and eventually the detectives investigating would be reassigned to other cases. It was over a year later that the next bodies were found in that same Belanglo forest. In October 1993, a man was out. He was collecting firewood, as he regularly did. He was a local, and he was intensely interested in the murders being from the area. So he would go out and collect firewood, but he would start going into new areas to see if he could find anything. And then, that October day, he drove to an area he hadn't been before, and he saw bones. At first he thought it was a kangaroo.
Human
Kangaroo
intuition,
remains, maybe? He started investigating, and then he knew it wasn't a kangaroo when he found a human skull.
Like, it's just a double murder at first? It's not serial, but this guy's looking.
Belanglo
Something's telling him.
News, because two more had been found. James Gibson and Deborah Everest, both 19 years old, both from Victoria, Australia. And they had last been seen in 1989.
Aussies.
They had been hitchhiking and, well, vanished. What was odd about this case was that items belonging to James had been found years before.
That's a
80
famous
miles
photo.
to the north, out of the forest. So his body being found here was odd. Those items, it was like his camera and a few other bits and bobs, they'd been placed on a guardrail of a road, way from where his body was. And they were laid out like somebody wanted them to be found. And so the police began to speculate that maybe, somebody was trying to mislead the police. Due to the decomposition, two skeletons, it was very difficult to determine how they died. But there were cuts on the bones, so likely stabbed to death. Though bullet casings were found too from a Ruger repeating rifle. Both also had cuts on their spines. Probably had been paralyzed like the two other victims.
He
There were
paralyzes
slash
them
marks on the
first.
skulls too. Like the killer had tried to carve something onto their heads. Now shit was getting pretty real. A task force was set up. Task Force Air. Tip lines set up with locals.
Carving their heads.
And one local had seen something about a year prior. Something that was very disturbing in the forest. First, he saw two separate vehicles driving. One a Ford sedan, and the second one was like a four-wheel drive. In the first car, a man was driving, and in the back seat were two other men, and then between the men was a woman, and she had like a cloth over her face.
What?
And then in the other car, a man was driving. There was a man in the back, and then another woman, like, cloth over their face, like they were being kidnapped. He gave this to the police, and couldn't remember the regs, but could remember some numbers, and off they went. And he signed his name, Alex Milat.
Milat? Alex Milat? What? He's saying Millet, but I'm pretty sure he meant Milat then.
The police continued their searches. And the following month, November 1993, another skeleton was found in the Belanglo forest. That of Simone Schmidl, 21, from Germany. She had last been seen leaving Sydney for Melbourne in January 1991. Around her body lay beer bottles, a fire pit, bullet casings. She had been stabbed to death, her spine severed. 2 days later, another 2 bodies were found. That's 7 altogether. This time it was 2 more Germans. Gabor Neugebauer, 21 years old, and Anya Habschied, 20 years old.
I didn't know he severed their
Last
spines.
seen leaving King's Cross in December 1991. Gabor had been shot in the head 6 times. Anya decapitated. Her skull never found. It appeared that she'd been alive when her head had been cut off and she was in the kneeling position. A profiler would say it looked ritualistic. There was evidence of torture to both victims, all 3 victims, and they would later scrap that determination that there was no sexual motivation. It seemed like all the victims, both men and women, had signs of sexual assault on them. And it was around this time that Paul Onions, back on the other side of the world, started hearing too about the bodies in Belanglo.
Men
He
and
even
women.
called to report his attack again, but the police were so overloaded with tips it went unnoticed. Overloaded because 500,000 Australian dollars were offered for information leading to the arrest of the serial killer. 37 detectives, if you can believe it, were working on this case full time. And that's when they started following an earlier lead, right? The Milat one. The Alex Milat, what he had seen. The witness to, quite a disturbing sight, he said. That really drew the police in because they found not necessarily what he had seen suspicious. They found it a suspicious story to tell. They wanted to look at him. And he came from a very big family. So they decided to just take a look at the whole Milat family all together. They lived in the area. See, another Milat tip also came in, right? The girlfriend of a man who worked with Ivan Milat said, check him out.
I know a lot of people that know the family, different parts of
Ivan
them.
worked at a concrete company. His brother Richard, too.
They were that crazy family.
Ivan also had a very dangerous criminal history.
Putrid.
Ivan Robert Marko Milat was born on the 27th of December 1945. One of 14 children. His parents were Croatian immigrants. His dad worked the Sydney docks. His mother, a homemaker.
That picture.
They were a big family. The parents, were disciplinarians.
Were
And I
they
suppose
even in
how
that
many
picture?
kids- You kind of have to be. But the kids, they weren't having it. Petty crime, robberies, that sort of thing. Out of the 10 boys in the brood, 7 were in trouble with the law. Crazy Ivan, he was mad into it. He grew more and more familiar with the insides of jails. Continued robbing, stealing, joyriding, Grand Theft Auto, that kind of shite. And the violence increasingly grew too. He once bragged to a friend he knew how to turn a person into a head on a stick by stabbing them in the spine. He also loved shooting and hunting in the Belanglo.
What? Head on a stick.
He was married for about 5 years, but she left due to horrific domestic violence. And it was not long after she left that the murders began, because he didn't have his wife to take out his rage on anymore. It was now Ivan against the world, and the world deserved it. Just because. He was also accused of kidnapping 2 hitchhikers and raping one of them in 1979, being armed with a knife and a rope. That was later, unfortunately, dismissed. On each of the approximate days the victims disappeared, Ivan was found to have not been in work, while the other Milats were. He lived near the forest. He used to own a 4-wheel drive, but sold it 2 months before the first bodies were found, and the police began surveilling Ivan Milat. The police also continually questioned Alex, and Alex, Milat, who was becoming fearful that he was a suspect. He also mentioned at one point a backpack that Ivan had given to Alex's wife. When the police saw a picture of the backpack, well, that once belonged to Simone Schmidl. The police also tracked down the new owner of Ivan's old 4-wheel drive. Under the seat, they found a bullet casing. It was a .22, and it matched casings found in the forest. The investigators also finally discovered Paul Onion's report, and it matched what they had been concluding about Ivan Milat. Same area, same car, matching description, and MO. Paul even flew back to speak with investigators and showed them where the attack had occurred. It occurred right outside the bungalow. He then, during a video lineup, positively identified Ivan as his attacker. Ivan Milat's house was raided on the 22nd of May 1994 at 6:30 a.m. His girlfriend was in the house at the time, and so the house was surrounded, and the police politely, they rang him to inform him of this, that the house was surrounded, and they asked him to come out, hands up. After a bit of cajoling, he did, and he was arrested. Ivan Milat denied any knowledge of the murders. In his house, they also found a postcard addressed to Ivan. A friend had sent it from New Zealand. Though it wasn't addressed to Ivan Milat, it was addressed to Bill.
A 50-year-old man is being questioned tonight in Sydney about the backpacker murders.
That's the name
he was arrested in a huge overnight operation in the Campbelltown area, and since then he's been charged with threatening a hitchhiker in 1990.
The dawn raid was carried out by officers from Task Force Air, set up last October after the remains of 7 backpackers were discovered in the Belangolo State Forest. Today's arrest shocked residents from the street where the man lived at Eaglevale on Sydney's west.
He's a really nice bloke.
The man shared the house with his sister. His girlfriend was questioned by police.
His sister is his
Locals
girlfriend.
said weeks of police activity suddenly made sense.
Any time of the day, Nelly, you could go up there and there'd be a car parked and there'd be 1 or 2 men in there or whatever.
It's understood the MacArthur area has been under surveillance for at least 3 months.
Just 6 months ago, police weren't discounting the possibility of finding more bodies in the Belangolo forest. The search area was widened. The reward doubled.
49-year-old man by the name of Ivan Milat appeared. He's a ganger by occupation, comes from Eaglevale. He's been charged with 2 counts, one armed robbery and another of using a gun to commit an offence.
It's just to hold him.
Knives and weapons were found, items belonging to his many victims. He was charged with 7 counts of murder and the attempted murder of Paul Onions.
An angry Mr. Milat said it wasn't fair amidst cries from the gallery to give him bail. I'm stuck in jail, yet they don't have 1 iota of proof.
Ivan Milat applied for bail, but that was immediately opposed by the Crown prosecutor, who said back in 1971, Mr. Milat had fled the country for 3 years when he was facing rape charges.
Just everyone's shit.
Mr. Milat said he'd been found not guilty and proclaimed his innocence, telling the court, I'm going to defend these charges.
He was advised to plead guilty by his lawyer, and so he dismissed his lawyer after this. He went on trial in 1996, pleading not guilty to all the charges. The Milat family supported Ivan, said he didn't do it.
What sort of support is he getting from his family? Are many people there to witness what's going on?
His sister-in-law said they're proud of Ivan and they'll stick by him, despite the enormity of the charges.
145 witnesses took the stand. My God. Including Paul.
Yeah, right.
15 weeks it lasted. Ivan himself went up, denying everything and saying, someone's trying to make me look bad. Ivan received a life sentence for each murder, and 6 years for the attempted murder. And there you have it. There aren't enough crikeys in the world for this disturbing. It's Australia's worst serial killer.
I'm just going to stop it there. The end of the video is alright. Anyway, he's got a few more minutes, but he's probably going, nope, it doesn't stop there. That's probably what he's going to say. He's going to talk about when he's in the Supermax and all this stuff, chopped his finger off, sent it to the governor, the commissioner, to just crazy shit, man. This guy's like wild, you know, multiple rape allegations. People that talk about him sometimes like, he's innocent. Mate, all the shits at his house, he's positively identified by other people, by a survivor, in the same type of shit that was going to happen. I didn't know some of that stuff, like how he severed the thing. It's very hard for me typically to watch this stuff of Ivan Milat and anyone else, Putrid, like, it really, really gets me burning and shit. But that guy's a good, he tells stories good, but he also gets a lot of information that we wouldn't normally typically have. Some of it can't be presented on Australian TV and stuff like that, but yeah, he SA'd them all, got him in the spine. Imagine that, not being able to move, this grub's doing whatever he wants to you. There's also another thing, a lot of people think his brother, I think is it Boris, or is Boris the one that's against him? Anyway, that he was involved. Know what I mean? His brother Alex obviously made that statement to get police, going in another direction. I don't know how a .22 bullet was found in his car years after he sold it to someone under the seat. Like, if you're not cleaned the car, that's fucking weird. Like, unless it was trapped under something and, you had to take the seat off to get to it, or who knows. Anyway, Ivan Milat, Australia's worst serial killer. I don't know if he's the worst. There's that guy in Adelaide that they called the devil and that. But probably because of what he's doing to them, severing their spines, fucking making them not be able to move. Innocent young girls and boys, like, essaying them all. Keeping their stuff. Gave a backpack to his brother's wife. Why would you give her a backpack for one? Like some used backpack. Hey, do you want a backpack? Fucking weird shit, man. Weird family going on. A lot of people, like, that grew up in them areas, Campbelltown, used to say, like, people remember that house, the Milat house, because, not just because of all the people there, but it's that house in the community where everyone's like, these cunts are either, inbred or a bunch of psychopaths. Everyone knows not to go near there. Their house looks like, hillbilly central. Or Bogan Central. In Australia, we call them Bogans. No hillbillies here, just Bogans, bruh. Yeah. Anyway, guys, make sure to become a member for all the exclusive content. Join Top Tier. You'll get everything, including training videos, personal training, all that stuff. A lot of new content coming, different content coming, doing some real hood tours at the worst places, you know what I mean? I'm not going next to the worst places. We're going into the fucking depths of them. We're also going to speak to people from the community that are trying to help the areas, and then see if the local government will talk to us too and tell us what they're doing to help people there. Anyway, yeah, subscribe, like, share, comment, do all that shit for me. First reaction video. There'll be a few of them coming. They're usually to Australia's worst and most heinous criminals and crimes, and reacting to that. I try not to talk over it too much, let you watch the video, but also, you just want to see the way I react. I could jump up and get the video banned and say what I really think, you know what I mean, and start smashing shit up, but yeah. So here we have his final interview when the police went out to see him, when they found out he was about to pass, and they have tried to, get some locations off him. His reaction to them, the way he so nonchalant about it, he's truly an evil man. Not even protests. Someone that didn't do it and was about to die in that, you'd be like, fuck, my life's gone, like, I'm about to die, man. You'd have something to say to the police, like, you set me up, you pieces of shit, like, this is, you just took my life away. So he did not give a shit about anything. He was like, pff. Anyway, after this, you can go now.
Ivan, you'll be happy to hear, he didn't have a great time in jail. As soon as he arrived, he got the 7 shades of shite kicked out of him. He also tried to escape and failed miserably. All his appeals were worthless. In 2009, he cut off his own little finger trying to force an appeal. That was just wacky as shit, not the actions of a sane individual, and the courts didn't look too kindly upon it. He later went on a hunger strike for 9 days, wasn't eating for 9 days. This wasn't due to any kind of appeal. He was doing it to get a PlayStation. He didn't get it, and he's dead now. Toasty, I'm sure. Shortly before he died, he gave his police a final interview. Well, he actually didn't give him jack shit. They had a final interview with him, and the reason why is because they are sure as shit that he is linked to a lot more disappearances and murders, unsolved cases, and they were trying to ask him, you're gonna die. Please just help us put some cases to bed. This was his answer.
Having a bit of a chat to see whether we can shed any light and maybe get a bit of closure or for some families out there. How do you feel about that? Ivan. Yeah, that's a breath. It's okay.
I'm just tapping you because I don't know if you're asleep or awake. I don't want to keep banging you on the arm.
Because I don't believe anyone is so devoid of decency that they would take to the grave the knowledge and location of people's loved ones. The end result, Ivan, is that in 3 weeks or 3 months or however long you've got left on this earth, after you're gone, mate, and after, in years to come after we're all gone, everyone left is still going to believe that you were responsible for those 7 backpackers and probably for an abundance of others. I'd be certainly surprised if someone like yourself didn't want to put your 2 cents worth in, so to speak.
If there's things that you would like to speak to us about, we'd be happy to listen.
You feeling okay, Ivan?
I think he's been sleeping, Inspector Walpole. So we're just giving him a little shake. I was concerned he wasn't breathing. You right?
When we discovered that you weren't tuning too well last week and we were thinking about it, I thought, well, you know, even Ivan Milat, with everything that's been written about him, everything that's been said about him, even Ivan Milat has a family. Even Ivan Milat has a daughter. You know, if you've got one religious bone in your body, Ivan, and there's talk in the paper, and I don't know how true it is that you reckon you're going to heaven, mate, you're gonna need something to get a foot in the door, champ.
Ivan said nothing, and he never ever admitted what he had done. He took it all to the grave.